Good morning.
Thank you for joining us and our esteemed August panel of people who have fantastic and insightful things to tell us about the state of education in America. Let's just begin with the juicy, philosophical, wide-angle question that I think we all want the answer to, or at least your thoughts on. What is the responsibility of education in a civil society? And Julian, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to be here today. For me, education should make sure that students across the country have access to equal opportunities. Yesterday, as many of you saw, there was a school district in Mississippi that just now the court said that they had to desegregate schools in their school district. And ironically, today is the anniversary of the Brown v. Board decision, and we're still fighting to make sure that students across the country have equal access to opportunities. So for me, that's one thing. Another is to make sure that students are thinking critically about the world around them in order to make informed decisions in elections, for example. It's extremely important for students to look at data, look at information, and think about it with a critical eye to make informed decisions.
Dr. McGuire?
Well, I agree with Julian. I would just add that the public schools in our country have long played a democratizing function, which has been, I think, de-emphasized in an ongoing narrative about the world of work and being ready for it. I'm not against being ready for the world of work, but I would argue, to Julian's point, if we don't help people learn to understand each other, learn to get along, appreciate one another's differences culturally and otherwise, we see today, I think, the growing implications of the kind of social and economic segregation that the public schools were designed to mitigate.
And everyone should feel free to jump in on this question, but Margaret, because we're talking about preparedness and how that intersects with these sort of broader philosophical goals of education, given your background, I wonder what you think.
At the school-based end, I feel a particular responsibility to prepare students with the skills needed to embrace their future so that students don't feel intimidated by their future or not informed about their choices, but that students are ready and are knowledgeable about the choices that they have, but they're equipped with the skills needed to be able to embrace and be able to engage in the workforce.
You're our student, Amara?
Oh.
You're our student. What's your definition?
Well, I think that education should set a standard of equity. I think that in a civil society, I think it should level out economic difference and, just other cultural differences between students within the, whatever educational institution and without. So it should be kind of this way of this kind of equality so that people could be prepared for what's next, but also be able to question the institution that, caused them to, learn new things. It should be kind of a cyclical kind of.
Rachel, are we getting close to fulfilling this mandate?
So my work is done because they really hit on all of it. For me, it really is a balance between, making sure that they have the skills and that they're prepared. But for me, because my kids are so young and we're so new and just beginning kind of the educational process, it's really about school is their first kind of community outside of the home. So learning that, there are going to be people with differences, that, some people have strengths in one area and some people have strengths in others. And, helping them navigate that and really supporting kids kind of wherever they are, because everyone comes in at very different places, needs different resources. So, while still there's absolutely a place for standards and kind of goals and metrics of where you want to go, I think we're seeing more kind of awareness and capacity to be flexible and really reflective of the kids' needs, and I think that's really important.
One of the defining realities of our schools today is diversity, right? In 2014, a milestone in American history, the first time ever, a majority of all the kids behind all of the desks in all of the public schools in America, not just LA and Phoenix and Dallas, but all the desks in all the schools are kids of color. And that line is only going forward. The projections are it'll be 55% by 2025, that by 2024, a majority of our high school graduates will be kids of color. How does this demographic transformation of the schools change both the opportunities and the challenges facing public education? Julian, you want to start? Julian, maybe?
Oh,
Yeah.
well, unfortunately, to my earlier point, I feel that a lot of school systems across the country are becoming even more segregated. Even though we have more students of color in schools, students are continuing to attend apartheid schools where minority groups, people of color, are the majority in those schools. So I think we really need to talk a lot more about that and why these schools are continuing to occur, and also why these students don't have equal access to opportunities, as you just stated, because that's going to be a real problem moving forward as the demographics continue to change.
Dr. McGuire?
I mean, I love following Julian. He gets stuff out on the, out on the table. So, an observation: the schools we have were designed for a different time. They were created to find the top 20% or so of the students. They would populate this room. They would be on TV. They'd run the companies and the government because there was plenty for everybody else to do. That's no longer true. And we have a new diverse majority for which the schools were not intended to serve well. So the central issue the country faces is figuring out what school design, what system actually works now for the vast majority of kids who need to be prepared for jobs that don't yet exist, and who need to be able to do all the things other panelists have already said about understanding the new world that they live in.
Can I follow up with one question? Amara, let me ask you. I mean, you're in even in schools that are diverse now on paper, when you look at the overall student body, how much interaction is there? How much actual in the daily life of the school, how much of the different groups intersect and interact?
Oh, well, at my school, which is Woodrow Wilson, which is, I guess down the street, we have a acknowledged issue of kind of self-segregation. So the black students hang out in one group, and the white students hang out in one group, and the Hispanic students hang out in one group, and the Asian students hang out in one group. So it's this constant separation, and I think it's mostly cultural. And there are deeper divides when you get to socioeconomic status in DC. And there are a lot of stigmas around kids who are from Southeast, compared to students who are from downtown Northwest DC. So there isn't, and of course that segregation is historical. It's from parents and their grandparents dividing themselves from each other. So it's kind of replicated in a school setting. So it's still prevalent. Yeah.
I want to follow on that because I also went to Wilson Junior High School just a few years ago in the Jurassic era. And I was a product of the DC. I am a product of the DCPS. I went to Murch, Deal, and Wilson, just like you.
Yeah, like me. Yeah.
And yes. I'm losing my earpiece. And the problems around race were the same, and that was literally decades ago. And the socioeconomic divides have gotten sharper and steeper and more pronounced. We're more, I think, aware of them and able to articulate those differences. Yeah. But I would ask from an administrative point of view and from a parental point of view, how much can a school combat this? I mean, what specifically is the role of the institution in sort of trying to equalize the field, if you will, among students so that there is greater integration? Dr. McGuire.
Well, look, I do think schools can't do it alone. We've been through about a 12-year period in which we've decided that they could, and now the data reveal that that's not so. So there are clearly needs for more collaboration and partnership between schools and communities, between schools and companies and the like. At the same time, we could think of school as a place to make those connections. You know, there are curricular ways we could do that. There are extracurricular ways we could do that. So I think it's both and. We could use a lot more imagination inside schools to help open the world up and make connections at the same time that systemically we make better connections. I'll talk more about that if you are around. Ask me to.
Well, Margaret, but I wonder from career and technical education standpoint, when you have, what is the landscape there in terms of socioeconomic divide, and how pronounced is it?
So traditionally, I think career tech, formerly known as VOCED, had a misperception of being only targeted for students who weren't perhaps going to college or university. I think that perception has changed. We're finding that in order to truly prepare students for the workforce, having that hands-on experience in career tech ed classes and programs is actually empowering students to make well-informed choices. We often find that in those classes, especially in career tech ed classes, it is the great equalizer. You walk into a career tech, even an auto tech class, you might have in there a student that comes from a very difficult background, a student who might come in from an AP Physics background that is wanting to apply their knowledge of physics in terms of working with engines. You have female students who just never had a chance to work with cars and for the first time is now working with cars. We have students who have recently arrived from Central America and are new to the country, but because it's an opportunity to work hands-on, being able to learn skills, it's an opportunity for all our students. And so we find that the classroom is the great equalizer. It's that opportunity of students being able to interact in a less biased situation where students are not being judged by their background or where they came from, but in terms of the skills that they develop in that class. And so there's a mutual sense of respect in the work that they're performing together.
You know, we mentioned that the school system has hit one historic milestone where now a majority of our public school students are kids of color. We've hit a second milestone that may be less kind of positive, where a majority of our students, public school students, now attend schools where most of their classmates qualify as poor or low income under federal guidelines. And that is true for about 3/4 of African American students, about 3/4 of Hispanic students attend schools that are defined as majority low income. Given that, you alluded to this a little bit before, Julian, when you have that level of concentrated poverty and economic isolation, is it plausible to ask schools alone to overcome the cumulative effects of that kind of dynamic? Is it fair to ask schools to handle that on their own?
That's a great question. I would say it starts there. The school that I used to work at, Capital City Public Charter School, we had a great principal. She's still there. I left. She's still there. Principal Reeves, and she supported teachers when we organized student-led race and equity trainings. So the students led it for the entire school, and that was a great way to really talk about race. And the students brought in the teachers, parents, and other students to talk about it. So I think that was a great start to bring up some of these issues. Because a lot of times, students and adults, we see the issues going on, but we don't talk about them. So I think the first step is to actually get them on the table. And also partnering with organizations to bring different resources to teachers to teach about this. Because oftentimes, the mainstream history textbooks or the materials out there don't really focus on the things that we really need to talk about. So it helps to have organizations like Teaching for Change or Teaching Tolerance that have a lot of great materials that teachers can use to really talk about it. So it doesn't solely mean that the teachers and staff members at a school have to do everything, but we're on the front line, so to speak, where we can really interact. We do interact with students every day, so we can have a large impact.
Yeah.
I think that's right, though, to put it in the larger context and being realistic of what we're expecting schools to be able to accomplish. I really think it's about how the schools are tapped into the broader community in Washington, D.C. So Janney has a partnership with Thrive, which is a shelter for women and children that the children from Janney can go and they can visit and they can wash tables and help, prepare food, and it's just an opportunity. I think it brings a lot of joy to the people that are in there visiting that night, but it also provides parents in the community with an opportunity to have that conversation. You know, that there are people in very different positions that you may be in, that we may be in now. And it helps start to expose them and kind of lay that foundation for differences and kind of appreciating that. And so I think that that's one thing that schools can really do, is kind of help tap into the community and support parents have that conversation.
Let me follow with one last question in this area, Dr. McGuire. Sean Reardon and his colleagues at Stanford, who have fabulous researchers on educational outcomes, they have studied the test scores in this path-breaking new study in every school district in the country. And I think one of the core findings was, and I'll just read you from their paper, of the 1,000 poorest districts in the US, only 68 have mean test scores at or above the national average, 6.8%. So obviously there are exceptions that do better, but they are rare. Is it possible to get the kind of performance that we're hoping for from an increasingly diverse school system if the levels of concentrated poverty and economic isolation that we now see persist? Or do you ultimately have to attack those problems outside of the four walls of the school in order to get the results that you want?
Well, so I think the last decade or so has been a test of your question, where the assumption was poverty is no excuse. And so the theory of change was we just need more accountability. We need to move the adults out who aren't getting it right, put the ones in that are. And then the other thing we need to do is we need to free them up to do their jobs, all right? Those things might be necessary, but I think Sean's data confirms that they're not sufficient. Another way of understanding Sean's work is to say he has unearthed or resurfaced a very strong correlation between income and learning, between spending and outcome. So the idea that money doesn't matter, I think is, it's just hard to get your mind around that. If it didn't matter, we wouldn't spend so different amounts of it, right? They spend twice as much up in Massachusetts as they do in Mississippi in that school district that you were referring to. So last thing I'll say, just imagine a kid who's middle or upper middle class, summer experiences paid for, no problem with access to health care, good grocery stores just up the street and around the corner with fresh produce. And then you go into these communities that Sean's data points to, and you see food insecurity, environmental hazards, low access to health care. Our study of this new majority just used one variable, free and reduced lunch. If you unpack that and looked at something like chronic absenteeism, you're starting to see all the challenges that people who are poor face. The schools can't handle those things alone. They do need to be outwardly responsible for opening up and making it easier for community groups, health centers, public health systems to enter the schools.
That sounds, in a second, we're going to start taking questions from the audience, so I think maybe if we could get the lights up a little bit.
The Phil Donahue portion of the program.
The part where I run around the audience with the microphone. But what you're saying is pretty radical, right? I think for the layman, the idea that a successful education, the education piece itself may be the final piece. That first you need to accommodate and account for health outcomes, for sort of socioeconomic injustices, that you need to put the various parts of this ecosystem together before you can even start asking and determining what a good and successful education looks like. I mean, is that where we're going, Julian? Is that the sort of understanding that educators would perhaps promote around ameliorating what seems to be a broken education system?
I would say so, but speaking from the I, when I was teaching, I focused on those things, but I more so focused on my day-to-day interaction with my students. Because a lot of the things that were just mentioned, I felt as though I couldn't control. I could control my lesson plans every day. I can control my relationship with my students. I can control having images up on my walls in the classroom, up on our walls in the classroom that students could relate to. So I was really focused more so on the day in, day out lesson plans and critical thinking that I was going to bring to my students. I think it's very important to talk about the other things, but that for me is really the essence of teaching, and that's where my passion lies, that day in, day out communication with students and parents.
But just to take the flip side a little bit, I mean, kids are in school for a really good chunk of the day. Like, it is a really good opportunity to make sure they're moving, to make sure that they're getting healthy foods when they are getting a lunch, and when they are getting a breakfast, when they are getting a snack. And that the activities that they're exposed to, whether they're languages or, you know, other resources, that they're done in a way that are kind of reflective of where they are. So, I mean, I agree. I wouldn't wait to, you know, till we fix all of the other socioeconomic issues. It'll be a while probably till we get to education. But they, you know, there's this understanding I think we've gotten better at, that they do go hand in hand, that we can't just turn it over to the schools and say, okay, do your job, bring me a Rhodes Scholar when you're done. That it really is an opportunity for all of us to kind of work together.
Although my parents did say to my school, okay, bring us a Rhodes Scholar. Come with her. Okay, so we're going to go to the audience with some questions, and the audience is you, or comments. So if you want to just raise your hand, and someone will come with a microphone right here in the front row.
Thank you. My name is Li Yang. Thanks for your presentation. We are talking about education, but basically we have to know education purpose. Provide children with a nourishing educational environment, both in the family and also in the school. But currently, a lot of factors, outside factors, it's not the children, it's not family. The outside factor affect these environments. So I can identify a lot. Let's put our education system failure. So I just wonder if you can really address those issues. For instance, mass incarceration, for instance, the free lunch program is not really free lunch. And a lot of times it's diverse resources away from non-education purpose for private gain. So unless you address these type of issues, I don't think you have additional and multi-million-dollar government spending is not going to help. And I can tell you, a lot of children, they are very gifted and talented. Once you send to school, they are labeled inferior. So just education, just teacher is not good enough. We have to say administration, or they have a psychologist or policing, that kind of program. It just makes the whole thing worse. We have to address those issues.
So that's a good question about outcomes and outside influences that may affect education. And I know you mentioned mass incarceration and resource allocation, something like free school lunches. How much is that a conversation that's being had in parallel among administrators and educators?
I think it should be a conversation that's discussed more at schools. Going back to the capital city again, we often had activities and projects at school where, to your point, the students brought in their own experiences to the project. So, for example, every senior at Capital City, they have to do a senior expedition in order to graduate from the school. And the senior expedition focuses on something going on in their community. So if it's a food desert, they'll focus on that. If it's teen pregnancy, they'll focus on that. So it gives them an opportunity to really focus research on an issue in their community that is real to them, and then share it with other students, parents, and people in the community. So that's a way to bring in things that students are going through outside of the classroom walls and really delve into it. And in some cases, really help to solve the problem in their neighborhoods.
Principal Chung, can I follow up on that? I was recently in Chicago with the Chicago community colleges, and they were facing historically low completion rates, under 10%. And one of the things they found that they concluded was that the interventions they needed to improve those numbers were as much about things outside of the classroom than things inside of the classroom in terms of academic guidance and so forth. I'm just wondering, in your experience, in terms of getting your students through to completion, what's the balance between things that happen within the four walls of the school and things that happen outside of the school, and how have you tried to address that?
So the day-to-day challenges can feel overwhelming because many of our students do come from very challenging home lives that are beyond our control. But as an educator and as a site administrator, those are things that we have no control over. What do we have control is the time that we have with our students when they're with us at school. So that's the challenge. As an educator, I think we embrace that challenge. We know that we need to provide comprehensive support services to many of our students that go beyond the times that they have with us during school. So making sure that we partner with social services, with local businesses, with local nonprofits. We even have every Wednesday, we partner with the co-ops, so we have free food pickups on Wednesdays. We do house teen parenting at our school, so we do provide that as a service, free daycare for teen parents, as well as making sure they go to their doctor appointments and that they're eating healthy. But most of all, I think our greatest challenge is making sure our students, no matter what background they come from, that they have this incredible opportunity through the education that they're receiving, so that the skills and knowledge that they gain while they're in school are about empowering them. It's about being able to realize that they are good at something. And I think that that's where I feel incredibly lucky to be at a career tech ed high school program, where students traditionally at a traditional high school may have felt disenfranchised because perhaps they were not academically oriented. But they find that working with their hands, they develop incredible confidence in something that they never knew. And to be able to see children's, the lights in their eyes light up and realize, wow, I'm actually good at something. This is something that I can do. That confidence, it takes them a long ways, and it makes them realize that they can take control of their lives, that the circumstances into which that they were born and are living doesn't necessarily have to control their fate or their future, that they have control, they have choices. So I think that that's kind of our calling as educators, is to be able to equip and empower our students to help them realize that they have that power within themselves.
I mean, hats off to you. That is that school, what you just described, is the locus of so many different things, whether it's nutrition or psychology, in a manner of speaking. To be the harbingers of hope like that is incredibly impressive. Let's go back to our audience over here.
No.
I want you on the tape.
Given all the wonderful, good work that you're doing, all of you, and the fact that there really is a very large amount of federal dollars that are targeted to the very populations you're talking about. I'm thinking specifically about Title I programs and our special ed programs. We're talking billions of dollars. What would you change in those programs, small things, big things? What would you change so that you could be more effective and more powerful in what you're doing?
Margaret,
What do you think?
Okay, so again, I feel incredibly fortunate to be at the Career Center because we actually have a program called the Program for Employment Preparedness for students with disabilities that have already completed 4 years of high school and are not yet ready to transition into adulthood. So we provide for them additional job training. We have over 30 internship sites where we send our staff with the students. They get additional job training. They learn to take public transportation. They learn independent living skills, and they learn incredible confidence during the years that they're with us until the age of 21. And we partner with their parents, with the local industry, with local businesses. And we're finding that many of the businesses actually have been given incentives by the federal government to work with adults with disabilities. So being able to realize that all adults, regardless of whether they have a disability or not, should have access to be able to support themselves with dignity. So I think that that's where we feel, especially for parents who have raised children many times with incredible challenges, to feel a sense of hope that their adult child has a future in being able to engage in the workforce.
Before I bring you guys, Amara, can I rephrase that question a little bit just so that kind of from your vantage point, when you look at the kids who succeed from tougher backgrounds in your school versus those who don't, what would be the critical intervention that would help more get over the top? What is the difference between those who succeed and those who don't?
I think just kind of like on the domestic school environment, I think that making a student feel valued and making that student feel as if they could, they have something to offer to the curriculum. It's not just something that's just being, thrown at them, 90 miles per hour. And it's not just within my school, it's within Dunbar, in Roosevelt, in those schools that have a graduation rate of 60% and have a 94% AP exam score of like a 1. These schools, students aren't feeling as if they should come to school every day or even graduate because they don't feel valued in their environment, and it's perpetual every day. So, that's kind of how it is for a student, I guess.
Ron, I'd change 3 things. This will sound policy wonky, so that the first thing I would change is I would update the data we use to target where those federal resources go. The second thing I would do is I would create more powerful incentives to evaluate the use of those resources to see if they work. And the third thing I would do is I would get rid of the regs that prohibit collaboration and braiding of funds across sectors and programs.
All right, let's go back in this section. Do we have anyone right here?
I'm Rebecca Fitch, and I just recently retired from the Civil Rights Data Collection.
And you know someone on stage.
And on the stage. I'm struck by the lack of an explicit curriculum and instruction for students about how to be effective learners, really from the earliest grades on. And that Coursera had a course on learning how to learn. And that kind of blew away all of their numbers for people that participated. And it seems to me that those are skills that are particularly critical, and there's a kind of an assumption of a transfer of social capital, and that kids should learn this in school. It shouldn't be an assumption that someone else outside of school will teach them.
Are we focused enough on learning how to learn?
Well, I believe that in-depth project-based learning is really important because, of course, I'm sure standardized testing is going to come up over the next 2 days, but
Let's bring it up
now.
Let's bring it up now.
Yeah. But project-based learning, the students can really get in depth with whatever topic they're focusing on. It's not just one assessment and then the numbers go off somewhere else in the country, but they're focusing on an issue that's really important to them. So all of the research skills that they learn, bibliographies, all of that, the transferable skills come from focusing on a topic, a focused, structured topic that they can work on over a semester. At Capital City, the students did expeditions every semester. So it was a really in-depth look at one topic across content areas. And then the students would present their work at the end of every semester to a panel of their fellow students in class.
Well, you all have given us a terrific framework. Will you join me in thanking this panel? Terrific way to set up our conversation for the day. Alex, any final thoughts?
I'll be here all day. We have a lot of great stuff happening today, so please stick around.
Yes.
Thank you to our
Thank
panel.
you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.